In 9.4 day 2, we're going to do a little more with ellipses. So first thing we're going to do is label a few things on the diagram. So first let's label A, which is the distance from the center to the vertex. So the center is obviously in the middle, and there are two vertices, so I'll just choose the one on the left. So that is A. And if you have a vertical ellipse, then A would be from the center still, and then you either go to the top or to the bottom. So I'll go to the top. So that's A. So don't go all the way across. If you go all the way across, that's 2A, the length of the major axis. Okay, next let's label B. B is the distance from the center to the co vertex. So I start in the center. Then for this ellipse, I could either go to the top or to the bottom. So I'll just go to the top. If I went from top to bottom, that would be the whole minor axis. For the vertical ellipse, starts at the center and goes to one of the sides. So that is B. Okay. C is the distance from the center to one of the foci. So here's an example of C. So from the center to one of the foci. And let's put a focus right here. Alright, some things to remember. A is always longer than B, and A and C are always together. So they will either both be horizontal or they will both be vertical. A and C always go the same way. Alright, we learned that A is bigger than B, so if X has the bigger denominator, the ellipse looks horizontal like that. And if Y has the bigger denominator, the ellipse will be vertical, like that. Okay, for the foci, we learned that the center is H, K. When your ellipse is horizontal, you're going to take the C value and add and subtract that with the H, with the X coordinate. Alright, when your ellipse is vertical, you're going to take your center H, K, and you're going to add and subtract C to the Y coordinate, which is K. Now what's C? The way you get C, there's this equation that looks like the Pythagorean theorem, but instead of a squared plus b squared, you have a squared minus b squared. Alright, so that was a lot of new information. Let's put it to use. So for number 1, we want to graph the ellipse and find a few things. So let's graph it first. Vertices at 5, 0 and negative 5, 0. Co-vertices at 0, 3 and 0, negative 3. Okay, so it's pretty obvious that the center is at the origin. That's the midpoint of those and those. So we graph the ellipse. Now we need to find the center. Center is 0, 0. And next we have to find the foci. So in order to find the foci, you need to know what C is. So we use this equation, a squared minus b squared equals c squared. Alright, so what's A? A is the distance from the center to either of the vertices. So how far is it from 0, 0 to either of these? It is 5. So A is 5. 5 squared minus. How far is it from 0, 0 to those points. B would be 3. From 0, 0 to these points, it's 3. So 3 squared equals c squared. So this becomes 25 minus 9 equals c squared. 16 equals c squared, and now we take the square root. C equals 4. Alright, so for the foci, you always take C and you add it to one of the coordinates. This is a horizontal ellipse. You can tell because it goes 5 to the side, but it only goes up and down 3, so it's longer in the x direction. So now we're going to take this value and add it to the x coordinate. And you're also going to subtract it. So we're going to have 0 plus 4 and 0 minus 4. So there are two foci. One at 4, 0, and the other at negative 4, 0. Alright, the major and minor axes lengths. Looking at the graph, we could tell that A is 5, so we double that, and you get the major is 10. Right, the minor axis, well, the ellipse from the center goes up 3 and down 3. So up 3 and down 3 make a total of 6. Alright, and that's everything they wanted. So graph, center, foci, major, and minor. They don't ask for the equation. Okay, for number 2. We could tell this is centered at 0, 0. And the way we could tell that, there are no parentheses with the x and the y in the numerator. So the center is here at 0, 0. Let's start with the side to side. Underneath x goes side to side. Underneath x, we have a 9. Square root of 9 is 3, so we're going to go 3 to the left and 3 to the right. Now, underneath y, we have a 12. We know the square root of 12 is somewhere between 3 and 4. So I'm going to estimate it by going 3.5. Okay, I know this is a vertical ellipse because 12 is bigger than 9, and the 12 goes with y. Alright, for the foci, we have to do a squared minus b squared equals c squared. So a squared is always the bigger denominator, and it's already squared. B squared is always the smaller denominator. So 3 equals c squared, so c equals radical 3. Alright, now we have to decide, are we going to give the c to the x or to the y? Well, this is a vertical ellipse, so this time we're going to give it to the y. So we're going to take 0 and add and subtract radical 3. Okay, the major and minor axis. So the way you find the major, you find the bigger denominator, take the square root. So the square root of 12 is radical 12. Then you multiply that by 2. So it's going to be 2 times radical 12. We know that radical 12 is the same as radical 4 times 3. So rad 12 is 2 rad 3. Multiplying those together, we get 4 rad 3. And the minor is going to be a lot easier. Take the square root of 9. That's 3, and we double that, makes 6. So major axis, you square root the bigger denominator and multiply by 2. Minor axis, you square root the smaller denominator and then multiply by 2. For number 3, we see there are no parentheses on top, so that means the center is at the origin, 0, 0. Underneath x squared, we see 25. Square root of 25 is 5. So we're going to go 5 to the right and 5 to the left. Underneath y squared, we see 4. Take the square root of 4. That is 2, so we go up and down 2. We graph the ellipse with the 4 outside points. And now let's find the foci. So we have to do this equation, a squared minus b squared equals c squared. So this is going to be 25 minus 4 equals c squared. So c equals the square root of 21, and now we have to decide, do we give that to x or do we give that to y? So we're going to give that to x because this is a horizontal ellipse, because x has a bigger denominator. So we put plus or minus with it, and the y coordinate stays the same. Okay, the major axis. Look at the bigger denominator, 25. Take the square root, 5, and multiply that by 2, 10. The minor axis, take the smaller denominator, take the square root, which is 2, and then multiply by 2. That makes 4. Number 4 is also centered at the origin because there are no parentheses in the numerator. This is a vertical ellipse because y has a bigger denominator. Square root of 16 is 4. We go up and down 4. Square root of 9 is 3. We go left and right 3. Alright, the foci. So a squared minus b squared equals c squared. A squared is the bigger denominator, and you don't have to square it, it's already squared. B squared is the smaller denominator. So c squared equals 7, c equals radical 7. So who do we give that to, x or y? This is a vertical ellipse, so we give that to y. We put plus or minus. Okay, for the major axis, take the square root of 16, that's 4, and double it, that makes 8. For the minor axis, take the square root of 9, that is 3, and double it, that makes 6. And you could check this by counting. So how far is this? That is 8. What about the short one? So from the short end to the other end, that's 6. Okay, for number 5, first thing we have to do is put that equation in standard form. The way I can tell this is an ellipse is because there's an x squared and a y squared. They're both positive, but they don't have the same number in front. So the x squared has a 4 in front, the y squared has a 1 in front. Okay, so first put the x's together and leave a gap. Then put the y's together and leave another gap. And then that plus 4, move that to the other side and make it negative 4. Alright, so I'm going to group these together and group those together. We're not supposed to have a number in front of x squared or y squared other than 1. So first thing I'm going to do is take out a 4 from these x's If I take out 4 from negative 8x, that makes negative 2x. And I keep the gap there. And we don't have to take anything out from the y's. Okay, leave the gap. And now let's complete the square. So negative 2. Divide that by 2 makes negative 1, and square that makes plus 1. Okay, now do it with the 8. Divide that by 2 makes 4. Square 4, and you get 16. Okay, so now we have to add something to the other side to make it balanced. A lot of people would want to add 17 because they see a 16 and a 1. But this 1 is not really a 1 because it's going to get multiplied by 4. So that's really a 4 and a 16. Okay, so now we can factor. We have 4 parentheses x minus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals the negative 4 and the plus 4 cancel out, so the right side is just 16. Alright, now this still doesn't look right. We're supposed to have a 1 by itself on the right side. So if we divide this by 16, that'll be 1, and then we have to divide everything else by 16 as well. Alright, we can reduce over here. 4 over 16 is the same as 1 over 4. But then when you do that, what you should notice is y now has the bigger denominator. So because y has the bigger denominator, that should go first, making this a vertical ellipse. So y plus 4 squared over 16 goes first. X minus 1 squared over 4 goes next. And this equals 1. Alright, the center, looking at the coordinates, looking at the numerator, we start with x minus 1, so we do the opposite, positive 1. Y plus 4, we do the opposite, the y coordinate is negative 4. Alright, in order to find the foci, we have to do a squared minus b squared equals c squared. So if I do that up here, a squared minus b squared equals c squared. That'll be 16 minus 4 equals c squared. So c squared equals 12. That makes c 2 radical 3. The square root of 12 is the same as the square root of 4 times 3, and the square root of 4 is 2. Alright, now we haven't done one of these that's not centered at the origin, so we have to decide 2 rad 3. Do we give that to the x or to the y? Well, we said this is vertical, so we're going to give that to the y. So we're going to leave the x alone. The x is going to stay 1, and we're going to take the negative 4 and add and subtract 2 radical 3. So those are our foci. Okay, and now we have to find the major and the minor. So let's graph it first. Centered at 1, negative 4. We see a 16 under the y, so we're going to go up 4 and down 4, which is not going to fit on our graph. It's going to be down here. We want to go left and right 2. And graph our ellipse. Okay, and now I just need to write the major and the minor. I will squeeze that in down here. The major, take the square root of 16, that's 4, and multiply it by 2. the minor axis. Take the square root of 4, that's 2. Multiply that by 2, you get 4. Okay, for the last problem, they don't give us a graph. We just need to find the equation. Alright, so the center is always the midpoint, either of the vertices, the co-vertices, or the foci. So we can tell that the middle of these 2 points is 0, 0. Right? They both have a 0 in the x, and if you take the average of 12 and negative 12, that average would be 0. Okay, so we don't have to graph it, but if you did make a quick graph, you would see that the major axes numbers, or points, those are on top of each other. So because these are on top of each other and not side by side, that tells us it's a vertical ellipse. So I'm going to go ahead and write y squared over plus x squared over something equals 1. And I don't need parentheses because the center is 0, 0. And so now we have to figure out just what are a squared and b squared. Okay, so in the beginning of the notes we learned that the vertices, which are the endpoints of the major axis, are a units away from the center. So that means a is 12. We also learned that the foci are c units away from the center. So from 0, 0 to this point, that is radical 23 away. So we have A, we have C, we just don't have B. So using the formula, A squared minus B squared equals C squared. A squared is 144. B squared we don't know. And C squared, rad 23 times rad 23 is 23. Now, if I subtract 144 to the other side, I get negative 121. Now I'm just going to get rid of these negatives. So b squared equals 121. And I don't have to take the square root because b does not go in the denominator. B squared goes in the denominator. So we know b squared is 121. We need a squared, not a. A squared, 12 squared is 144. Alright, and that's it for 9.4.